Just how intense was the home environment for Purdue when the Badgers knocked them off? Let's talk about this team plus some recruiting thoughts. We got the great Nick Osen joining the show. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Harings. Today's episode, we are talking about the Purdue game. Nick Osen was there. He's going to give us the latest and the lowdown from Mackey. We're talking basketball storylines, football updates, all that and more. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 back when you hit your $5 bonus bet. That's over at FanDuel.com. Let's bring Nick in. As always, man, it is great to have you here. Awesome. You were at the Purdue game. I want to start here. We got a bunch of questions. One of the ones I got again and again and again was, what was that environment like?
Ryan, it's so great to be back, my dude. It's been a little bit too long for us, quite honestly. So I will say this, and then I'll kind of go right to that answer. Been at Mackey a couple times now, and it is a place that truly lives up to the hype. It is like people might not love this in Wisconsin, but a Hilton Coliseum at Iowa State, Fog Allen at Kansas. It is really in that upper echelon. And in terms of noise, it's interesting because before the game, it's almost like a party. Like they've got this in-house DJ that is truly phenomenal, like kind of playing a bunch of the hits that you maybe think of now, but also, late 80s, 90s, kind of some of those pump-up songs, early 2000s. Mr. Brightside was playing. That's one of my favorites. But it's interesting. Then the game starts, and it's like it comes down a little bit. So it's just a little bit quiet early on. But then whenever Wisconsin has the rock, it gets pretty loud because they're obviously trying to throw you off. One of my favorite things, Ryan, about that place that I haven't seen anywhere is, let's say there was like a questionable foul on Trey Kaufman-Renn in their eyes, right? They have these extra video screens, I think 4 of them throughout the arena, and it's playing like a Charles Barkley gif that's just like, like kind of questioning it. It was quite funny. So I'm a fan of Mackey. I actually respect Matt Painter and that program a ton, just as Coach Gard does. And, it was a really cool trip. Obviously, a little more fun to cover a win.
And we get this question here. This one's from Mr. October. Compare the Mackey environment to the Kohl Center. I almost said Camp Randall, but the Kohl Center. Where are they alike? Where are they different?
Mm-hmm. So alike, very passionate, obviously. I think we can agree for a couple years, Kohl Center at Wisconsin was not what we expect, what it should have been. And I think the last year or two, it's been getting kind of a little more upward. It can be very loud. The actual setting is a little bit similar. They both have the students kind of lined up like on top of each other, which is good, but they're a little bit, I would say, closer to the floor at times in Mackey. At least it feels like it. Certainly a larger student section. But I think one thing I'd say is different that can be improved, I would say, at the Kohl Center throughout time is there's just a little bit more kind of in-game reactions or entertainment at Mackey that really just keeps you plugged in. Like there were a couple media breaks. I was focusing, even writing a little bit, just because of kind of some of the fun and intensity of the competitions.
How big is this win? Is this the best win for the Badgers this year?
Without a doubt, Ryan. I mean, I'm fortunate, I'm a little bit of an optimist, obviously, and many know that. So I did go on a couple shows, no podcast rivals or anything, but a little bit of TV I got the chance to do, and just some radio hits, and I did pick Wisconsin. So like I was optimistic because of the matchups, I can honestly say, but I think this was huge. And man, you watch everything like me when you get time. So if you saw any of our coverage from the media that was there, or Badger men's basketball Twitter after, it was ho-hum. It's just another game, let's focus in going into it. But after, man, you could feel the excitement, the exuberance. There was the whole Cam McGee extra level, which maybe we will touch on. But this was a huge win. And now my only concern, my only one, because I just wrote a little column today that now I'm thinking about starting even larger, thinking about big ideas for this March run. There can't be a letdown about a day and a half from now against the Illini, because we know I would still put their talent level along with anybody in the conference.
Yeah, we've already watched the Fighting Illini against Wisconsin this year, and it wasn't a great outcome. I want to hit you with this because that was a comment somebody said too. Like, is it possible this team starts reading their own press clippings a little bit? Is it possible this team does have a letdown? I kind of don't think so. I think this team is veteran enough. I think they're well coached. I think enough guys on this team have a taste of what happened against JMU last year that it still is kind of in the back of their heads. But is that the one thing that you're worried about? One of the things I wrote down in my notes here is what's the one nit to pick with this team? What still maybe concerns you a little bit? Is that it, or is there something else?
Kind of a two-parter. So I would say that is possible, of course, for any college team, but I don't see it happening. I think that these guys are so veteran-led. I think that, like you mentioned, they experienced last year, like the team has kind of, lost some games they shouldn't in late February, early March. I don't think this group is going to do that. If they do lose to the Illini, I won't just call it a letdown unless they lose by like 22 or something, right? Because Illinois is still a pretty good team. They are very, very talented. Underwood is a solid coach. I think he's a better recruiter than an in-game coach, but he does just fine. And in terms of kind of my biggest concern, it would still probably just be depth at the five. I mean, I'm really nitpicking because for a while it was like depth at playmaking positions like a one. And now Kamari McGee has shown what he can do. Jack Janicki, could argue the 9th or 10th man, just looked like a honorable mention All Big Ten guard at that place at Mackey. So I'm not worried about that. Not even as worried about kind of guarding star post players because, yeah, Trey Kaufman-Renn got his, obviously, but nobody else really did. I think the defense really keyed in on guards, obviously, like Braden Smith. So that'd probably be it, Ryan. I wrote it, man. I'm not picking them to be, winning the Natty, but here's the thing. I'm at the point where if you told me in 5 weeks, this team is a 2 seed and they're headed to San Antonio for the Final Four, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, I love it. And I think they can shoot their way into that, which is incredible, but they've raised the ceiling of expectations. For me, the only real concern I have is running into the bad matchup, which is true for just about every team. Like there are certain matchups, big physical perimeter defensive teams that are going to give us a few issues, but every team has to worry about running into the wrong matchup. So I think this team is really good, man. And to pivot from that, I want to ask you, what's the best storyline this year? Is it because here's the I've asked this to a bunch of people, and people will say it's Carter Gilmore, incredible storyline. It's Kamari McGee. It's John Tonje. Remember what he did last year in injury-plagued season? He was not a heralded transfer portal guy. People will say it's Greg Gard. People will say it's fill in the blank, man. What is the best storyline with this team?
Man, there are a lot of fun ones, Ryan. I personally would say it is Coach Greg Gard. I mean, I was just talking with some other media members, and I think we are pretty grateful to cover a head coach like him because I really do think he does things the right way and really kind of cares, at our media pressers and things of that nature. But in terms of this team, like, how some fans were acting last year. And people are, fans are fans, but people are naive. Like, I'm not even fully into the levels of the portal, but like coming at him and the staff for some of those portal losses, I can tell you they can't just be printing money, So like that stuff isn't falling on the staff and just the way he hasn't just kind of pushed that behind, but now, I mean, Coach Gard is evoking National Coach of the Year buzz. Like that's a fact from national reporters that I trust. Do I think he's going to win it? I'm not sure. We'll see kind of how this finishes, but just that fact, and like you mentioned it perfectly, Ryan, Tonje was not a heralded transfer. Blackwell was supposed to take a jump, but maybe not be a star yet. Winter was still young. Nobody knew what like one of our guys, Carter Gilmore, would be like this year and things like that. Jack Janicki. So I personally think it's him. I think he's writing a phenomenal story with this group. I put on my board, you can feel the love and passion that he has for this team. Like, give Greg Gard maybe a star, like Tonje's for sure a star, but maybe 1 star and a bunch of guys that just buy into their roles. I think of some of his early teams where I was, still in college, covering, like that's kind of where he makes his money, where he kind of finds his bread and butter, leading a group that buys in. It's about we, not about me. I actually believe that about this team. And that is why, man, I really think they're going to end up on the 2 or 3 line, Ryan, which is just crazy even for me to say.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And I think you're right, by the way. I think it is Gard. We talked a little before the show. You talk about all those great storylines. They're all spokes on a wheel, and the hub is Greg Gard. It all connects to Greg Gard, man. And I think what he's done is incredible this year. So I agree with you. We're going to take a quick break here. Come back. We're going to talk a little bit more basketball. I want to talk about Kamari McGee. Plus, we have a bunch more of your comments and questions that's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. Then we'll come back with the great Nick Osen. That's coming up next, Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is incredible. Again, I talk about them all the time. You want to spice up your sports weekend, this is the place to do it. Official sportsbook of the NBA, MLB, NFL, Locked On Podcast Network. They got all the big hitters because they are crushing it. I always do responsibly. I would always say that. But if you want to do parlays, teasers, futures, spreads, it's all there. The user interface is clean. The people are legit. If you have a question, you talk to real people that can help you with real questions and give you real answers. Shocking, I know, but they got that figured out too. Plus, if you win, you get the payouts. They actually pay you quickly, unlike, I've said it, like that second uncle that's never going to give you that $5 back. You know it. And every time you see him, it's going to get awkward. It's never going to get awkward with FanDuel. They got you. Or at FanDuel.com, $5 bet. If you win, it gets you $150 in bonus bets. It's FanDuel.com. Go hit them up. Make your weekend a little more exciting. Do it responsibly. All right, let's jump back into this with Nick Osen. I want to talk to you about Kamari McGee, man. Obviously, watching on TV is always different than being there in person. What was your impression of the play when it happened? And then how did you see the team kind of respond to that?
Yeah, so I think you can go a few ways with this. My initial impression was, wow, that seems like a terrible call. Now, I want to give a lot of credit to Greg Gard and potentially even the ref crew. I'm not sure if that was the right call, but based on what Gard said, and I don't think it was just, kind of the classiness of him and just handling it well. Like, I guess I need to look up the exact rule, but it seems like if there is contact kind of in that area, it seems like that is generally how it is handled. There was a similar call in a Texas Tech game about 7 or 8 days ago. I wasn't watching that one live. I remember seeing it later. So interesting there. But, man, even this, we're very good friends. Obviously, a lot of listeners here know me. Like, again, generally an optimist just with sports, with life. When that happened and the team's down 9 and they miss a shot and that place is rocking, Ryan, I'm not sure that I thought they were going to come back. But then it was like, all right, Xavier Amos, checks in, gets a good stop, and then gets a 2. Jack Janicki hits a timely bucket. Blackwell was still in foul trouble. Klesmit hits one. They get a couple stops. Whoa, it's a 1-point game at half. And you just kind of felt like, all right, you're without a top 5 or 6 player you've got. Blackwell's barely played because of foul trouble. You're within just 1. There's a real chance here. And then it was that when it was 58-50, that's when I finally sat there like, they're going to do this, man. And so that's kind of how they came together. I personally felt like it was driven on the defensive end. I think this team continues to really impress me defensively. They weren't perfect. I mean, Purdue obviously scored a fair amount of points, but shutting down Braden Smith for a lot of it, not letting much of the bench get hot, and just the general buy-in, it's fantastic. And that's why I feel like I'm a broken record at times, but that stuff is kind of evoked from the staff. And so I think they should get a ton of credit. And I just also want to name guys like Klesmit, Crowell, Gilmore, just these vets that have been around a long time now, really leading this team within the game. And I will say, I might not kind of jump on or share everything from like social media teams here and there, but that post-game post, the picture with Kamari in the locker room, that was pretty special.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it, it's this awesome pic of Kamari, and like the team is around him, and it's like did it for Cam. It's awesome. It's well done. I 100% agree. Let me ask you this, man, because I'm super curious. I feel like building culture is more important now in the portal era than ever before. Like the teams that can figure out how to do it are going to outpunch their weight class because it's harder with players coming in and out, with players being more transactional. It's harder to get guys who buy in. I think and you hit it on your first segment that we talked about today. I thought it was a phenomenal point. That's what Gard has done this year, maybe better than anything. Is that repeatable in the portal era, or is this kind of lightning in the bottle where you get these portal guys, they buy in, and you have this group of veterans who's been there forever that are just hardworking in-state kids? I don't know how repeatable that is, but it feels like Greg Gard is the type of guy that can repeat it if it is.
I actually believe it is repeatable, Ryan. They might not get a John Tonje from the portal every year or an AJ Store, what we saw last year. But like, I think Wisconsin can be a little bit like Houston in that there is a clear-cut culture. They're generally building from the high school ranks. I think of a guy like Jamal Shed, obviously an All-American point guard they had. And then they get a portal guard here, maybe a big man here that they need, which I think will be similar to obviously what the Badgers go for this offseason probably. And then all right, you let a couple guys simmer, develop a little bit, make sure they're taken care of in a good spot mentally with the team. But then it's like good season, solid season, then great season when a couple develop. I think that is repeatable. And I get the sense that the culture really hasn't been diminished. Not to take shots at any other programs, but I think of one of the great coaches of our era and Bill Self. Like, you don't feel a strong culture watching that Kansas team, I don't think. I think of Arizona State that spent a ton of money on, Jaden Quaintance and a couple portal guys and really struggling at like 500. And so I just feel like what he's done, what he's doing, and just how the guys have bought in, I do feel is repeatable. I think they're almost, not going to say guaranteed, but very likely to get to the second weekend at this point. I can't always say that, but I think generally Gard will be able to do this and at least get tournament buzz every year.
Well, let's finish up basketball on that. It's a great segue into March. I've always said the regular season really matters to me personally. I think the Big Ten's a grind. I think if you have a chance to compete for a Big Ten title, it's an enormous deal because you have to be so good consistently to do that. When you look at March versus regular season, how do you line those two up? And then where does the Big Ten tournament fit into that for you?
So I'm still a little bit of a purist, I would say, and maybe it's just the nostalgia and the love of March Madness. That does still really matter to me. I know you can catch lightning in a bottle, but I don't think that's all luck. Like, some of it is matchup proof, some of it isn't. So I will say that is still number one for me, quite honestly. That's where legacies are made, Ryan. You don't necessarily remember just, again, random team. North Carolina won that 12 games in a row from December to early February. You're not talking about that, right? You're talking about, Raymond Felton, Sean May, Tyler Hansbrough, like Caleb Love, all these guys in March and April. That's what matters. You talk about Kaminsky, Decker, Bronson, Ben Brust in April, because that's what matters to me. So that is still far and away number one, and I can guarantee whether they're on the mic or not, like the players, they care about March. But Big Ten tournament or Big Ten regular season, that also means a ton, especially to some of these more traditional programs within the conference. I think of Purdue, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Michigan, like some of these other teams. Shoot, even a Maryland that's a little newer to the Big Ten, but like a lot of those programs really care too. So that's kind of how I break it down. I think if you can go on a Big Ten tournament run like last year, that's awesome. But I think if you said, hey, you're going to get to the Big Ten tourney title game or you're going to get to the Sweet 16, I would hope many are saying the Sweet 16, because then it's just like once you get to that second weekend, anything can happen.
100% agree on that. Like the Sweet 16. So I also don't really care about the Big Ten tournament at all. So any March success to me is more important than the tournament. I've always felt like if you have your seeds sewn up, I almost just want to sit out the Big Ten tournament, like because it matters more in other conferences. I'll say that.
Yeah.
In the Big Ten, I just feel like it's an injury waiting to happen, and if you win it, like that's the ultimate. I don't think anybody really cares about a Big Ten tournament title that much. I don't think.
I don't think it would like jump you a seed. I agree. I will say I think that them winning a couple of those last year, I think helped them get up to a 5. But you're right. Getting to like that final game and then that result, I mean, that probably doesn't matter. Kind of the brackets generally set at that point. No, but I'm with you. And I will just quickly add, I don't want to jinx anything, but if you're looking at brackets, and especially this week after the big win over Purdue, man, it's starting to look possible that this Badgers team could be playing in Milwaukee. We will have to see. Like, obviously, the wheels can't fall off the bus, right? I think they've probably got to go, I personally would say, at least 4-2 the rest of the way, because you're kind of going against like an Iowa State and a Purdue for some of those spots. but it's possible, Ryan, and that is exciting to think about.
Yeah, and it's still some tough games coming up. I mean, as you know, you have Michigan State coming up. You're going to have that Illinois game that you and I both agree is going to be tough. Illinois, when they're
Mhm.
clicking, that's a beast. So, but yeah, it's there. The possibility's there. And listen, everybody listening, and I haven't talked to Nick about this, but I'm telling you right now, they're in Milwaukee. We're going to be there. At least at some point, Nick and I will be in a bar together eating wings, and everyone will be welcome to join. It'll be incredible. So let's root for that.
Absolutely, we will be, dude.
Let's root for that. All right, we're going to take a quick second here. We're going to go back. I got some questions from people who, I told folks, the great Nick Osen beyond, local celebrity Nick Osen, as I've been calling him recently. So people submitted questions to that. Plus, we got who is going to be this year's on the football team? Who's going to be this year's version of Vinny Anthony, a veteran who breaks out and kind of for the first time in his career, Wisconsin shows out. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show. And a quick second to say thank you for tuning in, coming back with Nick Osen. Nick, let's start there. So I sent you a couple questions. Last year, Vinny Anthony, I would say, he broke out. I think we always knew the speed was there. There's talent there for sure. Yeah, Indiana, his career in high school was incredible, but he broke out. Who is this year's version of Vinny Anthony, the guy who's been here for a couple of years, but he breaks out this season?
So I've got one on each side of the ball.
I love it.
And one of these players I will potentially use for another one of the questions if we ask it, just to let you know. But I'll go with the same position. I think it's Tretch Kekayuna for me. Obviously, he showed some of those like flashes last season, but you're kind of looking at the same thing, right? Vinny was a true junior last year. This year, Tretch, third year in the program. Obviously, he got to, redshirt, I believe, that first year. You saw some of what he could do. Then he was maybe going to go elsewhere, back within the program. Like, that matters. I think that he's very much valued within this offense. And I'm excited to see really what he can do after another offseason. And I've said it to you on the show. I remember that last show when I was a little stuffed up. I've talked about it with you when we've caught up. Like, there is just kind of this comfort and confidence right now, just kind of within, I think, the return to what the offense is going to be like. So he'd be my answer there. And defensively, I'm going to go with Austin Brown because, again, a guy that has played a lot of snaps, but I don't think many would maybe say he was a star yet. I'm crazy high on his game, his skill set, his versatility. And then if I could just add, because it won't be an answer to the other ones, this is a new player to the team, but just somebody that I think is also going to bring some excitement to the offense, whether this year or next, Mark Hamper out of the portal from Idaho.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let me throw a couple of the answers up here from other people. So Herb Herman says veteran bust out's going to be Forkering, taking a big step up. Bringing into other answers here in a second. Young Clip says Dylan Jones or Tackett for that answer. Both good answers as well. I went with Cade Yakimelli for my kind of veteran bust out, just because we've seen but I think the question remains what happens if he gets 8 touches a game, 5 touches a game, right? And he's certainly not going to average 8+ yards per carry. With more carries, the efficiency is going to go down. And then on the defensive side, I kind of like the Tackett call. Austin Brown, I agree. Like he's a guy that I didn't even think of him. I don't know why. That's a really good answer as well. I think I'm going to go Cade and Tackett just based on the fact that it feels like Tackett's finally healthy. If he regains a version of the hype that he had coming out of high school, out of Manny High School down in Louisiana, there's a potential star there. And he's been here a couple of years, or he's been in college a couple of years here last year. So I'm going to go Tackett there. I'm going to go Cade on the offensive side. Let's get the next one.
I'm smiling because I had Tackett defensively as well. I had a feeling you were going to pick it. I think that'd be kind of the marquee name to pick this offseason. So great thinking, my guy.
Well, and that's a lot of the people that responded to this question were Tackett. So they're right there with you, the Badger fans. Obviously, the community that listens to this show, the community on your board, really, really sharp football fans. So they were all over that one. Let's go heartbeat of the team. Because I think Hunter Wooler was that last year. In fact, I kind of know he was. From conversations I've had, I'm sure you've had similar. Like, he was the heartbeat of that team. Who is your heartbeat of the team this year?
So I just want to make sure I'm not getting the questions confused here. So I said a couple. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give you 2 on offense, if that's okay.
Do it.
And 1 on defense. So I kind of got the sense when I spoke with this player when he came in that he was going to fit really well. And just kind of watching social media a little bit and seeing how things have been, even though he has not been around long, Ryan, I think there's a chance that QB1, Billy Edwards, could be that. I said Jake Renfro on offense. And then defense, this is kind of a maybe an off-kilter pick, but like very well respected. He's shown it with his play, and now I think he's gonna have to be more vocal. Christian Allegro. Because, I mean, again, I can tell you the staff is really excited about him. This isn't like a new name, but obviously there's been a lot of depth at some of those spots. I don't know if I'm going to say this is his defense, but like this might be his middle of the defense. You know what I mean? So I think that he's going to have a huge voice on that side of the rock, and I'm excited to see what he can do, man.
Yeah, it's like a mind meld, you and I, like a Vulcan mind meld. That's probably too young for you. It's probably Lakers who I had as well, along with a lot of people in the Discord. That is far and away the most popular answer on this. And I love your Billy Edwards one. Talking to people on staff, talking to Brady Collins, talking to people around the program. He feels a lot like a guy who as soon as he stepped into the room, like just has a certain vibe and an aura to him. Talking to the Locked On Maryland's guy, he was like, that guy's such a leader. He just didn't have an offensive line. I think those are great ones. Let's shift to the next one quick because I do want to save some time. We got questions for you that I definitely want to hit because people took the time to put them in. But the last one was just who wins the the Nizer Forkrin Award? The guy who is just an underrated, super solid starter that people probably don't talk about enough.
So this one was maybe the toughest for me, just because I think that there are a lot of good potential options. I might repeat Austin Brown here, kind of going with that defensive secondary. Again, I think that he will be really reliable. But I also wouldn't be shocked, and this isn't like a new name, but just because I think part of why he came back is because he could be really, really good. I think Riley Mahlman is going to play himself into the day 2 NFL conversation. So I'm going to go with him on offense.
That's a good one. I thought about Mahlman. I ended up going with Zachman, just as a guy who's going to be really solid. He's going to talk about him. I think he gets typecast a little bit. He's more athletic than people give him credit for. He's going to, by the time he's done here, he's going to have played a ton of ball. I know the staff was happy to get him back, especially with the lack of depth in that back end. So I think he's a good one. I love Mahlman as well.
Oh, he is athletic too. Absolutely.
And he doesn't get credit for it. Let me hit a couple of these questions here because I want to hit these if we have time. The first one here is from Christian. What are some names we should be keeping on? We're talking 2026 recruiting now at receiver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is a position I would say one of the ones that I do feel even the most well-versed with because I think there's some clear-cut top options. First name that comes to mind, Zachary Washington out of Illinois. He's got that OV set. I personally have Wisconsin as the favorite right now. He's got an OV set to Michigan State. They're a legit player here too. Look for potentially like a Louisville or Mizzou, potentially Ole Miss, like a couple of those programs in the mix as well. But I think he ends up in the Big Ten and say pretty good chance in Madison. Another guy, Tayshawn Bardo, similar schools vying for the top right now. Wisconsin, Michigan State with official visits. He picked up a good amount of offers in January, kind of during that open period. Owen Cobble out of Tennessee. He's got an OV set. So those are like 3 or 4 of the top ones that I would really say. Nasir Rankin. There was some Illinois buzz, but he obviously hasn't committed anywhere. He's a guy that can play either side of the ball, but I think receiver is where a lot of schools are trending. Wisconsin can lock in an OV there. They are a legitimate player there, too. He's focused on hoops right now. Dalen Sharper out of Arizona, potential name. But those are really some of the top that I am certainly most focused on right now. I think if you can land 2 out of those top 4 or so, damn good class.
Yeah, there's a lot of speed when you were talking about the Washington or a couple of those guys, a lot of athleticism in that group. A couple questions here. I want to tie these together. So we got a couple questions. And again, if talking recruiting, Osen's as good as it gets. So we're grateful to have him on the show. A couple of people asking about the impact of Max Steinecker going to USC. I know you've talked about this on your board. You and I have talked about it a little bit. So Caleb, what's the recruiting impact with Max gone? And then Mr. October, one commit so far. How connected is that to maybe Max and are kids slower to commit at this point? Let's tie those together. But yeah, where are we at with that?
Yeah, so not that this asked exactly, but I do expect there to be, I would say, some clarity with who could be next within the next week and a half, 2 weeks tops, potentially earlier. I was thinking maybe earlier. So I will say, I think that's going to be looked at a little bit closer here. Max was great. Like, you won't find many people or anybody really say a bad word about him. Like a lot of energy, attention to detail, passion for the program. Obviously, I got to know him a little bit, and doing the signing day interviews and things of that nature. Like I'm going to say what I wrote on my board almost exactly. He will find success in about whatever he does. He made a huge impact here. But there are a lot of very important members in the recruiting department. And I said to my readers, like, if you're reading my stories, you know that there are a lot of other guys too. Like Pat Lambert, huge for landing a bunch of these guys. I think of some of the other guys, maybe a little bit younger, like Brandon Rose, Zach Zilm, Jared Thompson. Like they all play really, really, really key roles, especially when you dig into some of the communications with recruits and, finding guys, evaluating. And in terms of kind of that one commit at this point question, I would not say really any of that is because of Max. I'm not going to say that it's because a lot of kids are much slower, because honestly, I'm seeing a little bit of a trend that kids are sometimes committing earlier, certainly wanting to lock in their OVs earlier. But I personally think 2025 was a bit of an anomaly. I mean, I think they had 9, maybe 10 commits before OVs starting. I don't think that is really kind of going to be the norm. I don't think 1 is going to be the norm. And we still have some spring ball practices where I wouldn't be shocked if 1, 2, maybe you see 3 kids pop or so before OVs. But I think as long as you've got a few before that happens, and then you're looking a little bit more normal. There are a couple guys that'll visit that I'll probably mostly save for the board, but maybe some recent offers for Wisconsin that I think if they get to campus in spring, I put out a story, guys, I feel really good about maybe making some crystal ball picks. So we will see there, but I wouldn't kind of attribute any slowness in terms of not having a bunch of numbers to that recent news with USC. I would not.
Yeah, and let me know if you think I'm off base on this or not. This is my Max take, and it's similar to yours in a lot of ways. I think Max was great. Like I had a chance to talk to him a little bit here and there, and he was really good. And I think it does impact you a little bit in the 26 class. I think it does hurt you a little bit in this class because he was really good. But I also think long-term Wisconsin will be fine. They're going to find a good fit, and there's a lot of talent in that recruiting department. So I think it's a bit of a short-term impact because anytime you lose quality people, short-term you're going to get hit. But I think long-term Wisconsin will be okay here. And I think Max was destined to leave at some point. I just think that was going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I think in this day and age, you don't expect like too many guys to, be at the same job from 23, 24 to 55. Like you just don't really see that too often. But I can just say, comfortably and confidently, because that is a lot of what I cover on a day-to-day basis. Like there is a ton of talent and confidence and trust and eyes for talent in that group. And Ryan, if we had Max on this show with us right now, he would say the same damn thing. Like He was awesome. You won't find people say like a bad word, but at these signing day interviews, he'd give a ton of credit to many of the people that I mentioned, Taylor, Marissa, like people that help with visits and getting in contact with recruits. So trust me on that one. I'm not teasing anything. I don't know, who the next hire will be. I've heard mostly a couple names. I think that they're really searching well and kind of focusing on attention to details because it's an important hire. But I don't get the sense it's like, anybody's just rushing into something either.
Well, let's grab one more question here because I want to be respectful of your time for sure. This is from
Let's
Caleb.
do 2 more. I got time for 2 more if you do.
Love it. I got 2 more queued up. I just always want to be respectful. So that's perfect. Caleb quickly over on the Discord wanted to know, because obviously you and I both love Mason Post the last class. You could argue he was the headliner. I mean, there's a couple people you could put in that discussion for sure. But he asked, who's the Mason Post of this class? The guy that is a big-time out-of-state get that should be a blue-chip program for, 4-star guy. Who is that in this class, do you think, potentially?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a couple, if that's all right. We're going to go with 1 offense and 2 defense. I think that 1 potentially on offense would be Kelvin Obot out of Idaho, one of the best tackles in the country right now. I think Coach A.J. Blazek has done a really good job there. I would think in OV, there's some likeliness to that. Obviously, he's far away, but I'll be surprised if he doesn't visit. And then when you see how things shake out, obviously. I had Wisconsin as the favorite for Posta coming into OVs, but Many in the industry did not. And that's not, just talking about Wisconsin, that's like around the country. I think that surprised some folks. So visits can change things. Defensively, probably would feel the best about a guy like Jackson Samuels Ford, a top 247 kind of outside linebacker / edge, coming from the Northeast. He's really kind of keyed in on schools like Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State, Rutgers, Ohio State's trying to get in there. So mostly Big Ten, but like a lot of big time programs. I love the things that he had to say about Wisconsin after his trip in January. So definitely a shot there. And then a guy that I feel like I've been watching for years in this class is Storm Miller, linebacker out of Ohio. I think we need to probably give him a bump. I think he's technically just a high 3-star for us, a 4-star composite, top 16, 17 linebacker, so same position as Bosa. He can play inside or outside, truthfully. A lot of heavy hitters schools on him right now. I think if he gets here for spring visit, there's a strong chance. I'd like to see a spring and an OV for me to say he's got a great chance at ending up in Madison. But Tressel and the staff have done a really good job there.
Yeah, that's a heck of an answer. I love it. Last question here. This is from Treg45, who I think is on your board as well. We talked about this before the show. Talk about official visits. Like when are we going to start maybe getting a little more word, a little more knowledge on who's coming, what's going on with the official visit season coming up?
Yeah, similar name to somebody on my board. So I would think it's probably the same person, which I definitely appreciate. So I feel like we've, been kind of getting those names out there and trying to be on top of things. I think, I'll be honest, kids have announced these OVs much earlier this year from what I've seen. Like I remember these starting to pop early to mid-March last year. Like without a doubt, we didn't have this many kind of in early February. I think I started one of those running lists in January. So I would say, what is it, February 16th, 17th, probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks is when I think most of them will be solidified. Now you'll get some offers maybe going out through spring ball. Okay, a kid comes to visit, you're just really impressed with how he handles himself. Maybe was a fringe player. Here's this offer. We're going to further evaluate you in May when we can go back on the road, see what happens. You will still see more. But that's what I would kind of say. But I would certainly say that first weekend and potentially that second one are already getting kind of a lot of names in there right now set to come to Madison, right?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't do this on the way out. Where can people find all the great work you do, obviously at 247? Where can people just keep up with Nick Osen?
Yeah, so at the real Nick Osen on Twitter, I share just about all my work. I've got some things I'm actually pretty excited about this week, about a 2,500, 3,000 word mailbag or so. I've started a new column, 4 Thoughts Friday, just kind of breaking down the week. I'll throw a nugget or two in there. We've got some live hoops coverage this week. Obviously, the Badgers. There's, in terms of basketball, there's a lot of fun stuff, Ryan, and only trying to continue that as well.
Nope. Always grateful for the time, Nick. Thank you for jumping on. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten. All the biggest stories from the conference on that podcast with realignment, NIL, all that craziness over there. On Wisconsin, go check out Nick's work at 247 and on Twitter. We will talk later, and let's go.